All right, well, it's the top of the hour, so we'll get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the workshop number 2 here on the last day of the Peralta Online Equity Conference. We'll hear from Amy Ort at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and she'll be talking about leveraging your learning management system to enhance equity in your course. For those who might want to use the captions, they are on and running. So you just have to go down to the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of the Zoom window, click the CC button that says live transcription and choose the subtitle, show subtitle. We want to encourage questions, and we will be taking those through the chat so we don't interrupt the speaker, but we will make sure to keep an eye on it, flag questions as they come up, and Amy can answer those either as she's going or save them to the end. But we are excited to have you here, Amy, and I will hand the talking stick over to you. So thank you, and let's get started.
All right, so thanks for that kind introduction, and thanks to everyone for coming today. Before we get started, I am going to go ahead and drop a link to the slides in the chat. So I know some folks like to be able to follow along kind of at their own pace and see where we're going. And there are also a couple of links in the presentation that you might be interested in clicking. So I'll give you all that. And then, as Kevin said, my name is Amy Ort. I am an instructional designer in the Center for Transformative Teaching at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And I'm going to talk to you today about some work that I've been doing in faculty development about really leveraging that learning management system as an equity tool in our courses. So what I'm going to be talking through today, first I'll tell you a little bit about our center and who I am and what kind of work that we're doing in this area. And then I'll talk a little bit about why kind of targeting the LMS is one of my favorite ways of getting folks talking about equity in their courses, particularly for folks that don't necessarily see this as key cornerstone of what they're doing in the classroom. I'll talk about a few best practices. And then finally, I'll give you some take-home resources. So as I was developing this talk, I was trying to figure out how to work that stuff in, and I just realized that there are exercises that'll work best if you really take them home and take some time to think about them instead of trying to work those into breakout rooms. So we'll do some interaction via chat, but the real workshop-y piece is going to be some resources that y'all can take home and use afterwards.
Excellent. Amy, just one quick question. I know you shared the slides in the chat. Would you also like to share your screen?
Oh my, that's an excellent point. Perfect. Is that better?
Yes, thank you so much.
Excellent. All right, so a little bit about our Center for Transformative Teaching and what kind of stuff that we're doing. So we are a team of 14 instructional designers on a campus of about 25,000 students. This is a public land grant institution, so a lot of our students are first-gen students coming from kind of rural Nebraska farm communities. A lot of what we do as instructional designers are individual consultations with faculty. So we'll work one-on-one with faculty on any questions or improvements they're making to their courses. But we're also really involved in sort of larger campus initiatives on DEI. We work a lot with our Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And we also put on tons of programming for our faculty. So we do workshops every month. We run institutes for teaching every summer, particularly for online teaching. So we're really involved kind of in all facets of university teaching. And we also incorporate kind of our DEI work on a lot of different levels. So we put together a ton of external facing resources. At the end, I'll give you a link to our website so you can kind of browse what's on there. All of our stuff is publicly available, so anyone can take a look at what we've developed. We've got a bunch of kind of web resources, and we also record all of our workshops and make those recordings available on our website. So if you want to see kind of what kind of stuff we're up to, all of that is available. And then in addition to our external work, we're also really involved in some kind of internal processes. So a lot of times universities have a tendency to focus a lot on faculty as well as students when it comes to DEI. So, trying to increase the number of students and student retention with a focus on equity, getting more diverse faculty. But a lot of times staff kind of get left off of that. And so we're trying to change that at our university as well, by reviewing our team policies, as well as doing a deep dive into our hiring practices to see if we're following best practices there. And our intent is to put together kind of some guides about that other folks can follow if there are other staff units at universities interested in doing those kind of deep dives into their own practices. So our approach to working with faculty on these issues is to really make it a cornerstone of everything that we do. So our kind of motto is that, good teaching is inclusive teaching. In reality, we really shouldn't have to qualify anything as inclusive teaching, because if you're following good teaching practices, you should be doing things that are fully inclusive. And that means that, by taking that approach, we're really working this into every single thing that we do. All of our workshops have an equity aspect to them. All of our programming has an equity aspect to it. So equity, inclusion, and particularly accessibility kind of frame everything that we're doing as a center. And while we're thinking about that, what we're particularly interested in are finding practices that both enhance equity while making life easier for instructors. So kind of finding those low-hanging fruits where it's something that instructors will latch onto because it makes their life easier, but also is gonna help our students. And that's kind of the work that I'm gonna be talking about today. Right, so why is this talk about targeting the LMS, or the learning management system? And for those that are maybe unfamiliar with the term, learning management system just refers to the kind of software that we use to facilitate our courses. So, Canvas, Blackboard, Moodle, D2L, Brightspace are all examples of what I'm talking about today. So why target that? One of the biggest things is that, especially thanks to the pandemic, everyone's using the learning management system now, right? So whether it's an in-person course, an online course, a hybrid course, everybody's kind of forced into this world where we're using our learning management system to provide some kinds of content for our students, to provide recordings of classes for students that can't make it. So that really makes it something that's ubiquitous. And if we're doing programming on this, we can target every single instructor on campus. Right. Also, it's something that our students report a lot of challenges with. So our Center for Academic Success and Transition collected a lot of data in the fall, asking students, how are you doing? What are you having challenges with? And the two biggest things that they reported as having challenges with are staying organized and being able to manage their workload. And these are things that the learning management system can help substantially with. So it's something that can help with the things that our students are having challenges with. And the ones that are particularly having challenges here are our neurodiverse students and our students from underrepresented backgrounds, right? So that makes it an equity tool when these are things that are going to disproportionately help those kind of students. Right, and then it's also something that's going to help faculty substantially. So if you're using it well, it's going to save faculty time and energy, mostly in the form of responding to student emails. So these are very specific, practical solutions. And finally, it helps us target faculty that otherwise may not be particularly interested in this, right? So there was a fantastic discussion yesterday about what those barriers to entry sometimes are with inclusive teaching. What are the myths that some people hold? Why might some faculty not latch on to programming that's explicitly marketed as inclusive teaching? So by marketing it as, this is helping with your LMS, we can get some of those folks into the conversation about equity without necessarily having to brand it as such, right? So that makes this a pretty low cost, high impact strategy. So what I'm going to be talking about today is pulled from a couple of the workshops that myself and some of my colleagues ran last summer. And when we ran those workshops, they weren't called, how to increase equity in your course by targeting your LMS. It was actually how to make your course more user-friendly for students and faculty. Right, so that is a title that gets faculty really excited because we're telling them we're going to make their lives easier, and it's also, we're telling them, hey, this is going to help your students at the same time. So we do, do workshops that are explicitly focused on equity, and those are some of our favorite things to run. But sometimes we realize that we need to target those other faculty as well. So we need to kind of find a way of bringing all of our faculty into the fold. And yeah, I can re-give you that link to the slides. Oh, looks like Kevin shared it as well. And again, as we're going through, if you do have questions, feel free to post those in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on that as we're going through. So I'm going to start by talking through kind of the three biggest things that I feel like faculty can do in their courses with respect to the learning management system. So the first one is leveraging it as a way to build deep connections with our students, right? And this is where I want to get y'all involved in the chat a little bit. Thinking about who do you want your students to think you are, right? So when you think about how your instructors are, or how your students are going to describe you to maybe other students, right? How they're going to think about you after your course is over. Who do you want them to think you are? How do you want them to describe you? So go ahead, I'll give you a couple of minutes to drop in the chat what descriptors you would want students to use when they're talking about you. Right, caring, approachable, helpful, caring, right, qualified and knowledgeable, respectful. Yeah, curious, enthusiastic, I like that. Hopefully not the worst teacher they ever had. Right, interested in helping everyone succeed. Right, so these are all excellent, right, excellent words. Right, great things that the hope really is that our students see us as love that warm demander type. Oh, looks like I don't know if you've been reading that culturally responsive teaching in the Brain book, if that's where you got it, but yeah, I'm deep in that one right now. So right, these are all words that suggest we want our students to see us as humans. We want them to see us as helpful and caring about them, as well as kind of deeply knowledgeable about the subject that we're in. So now, and this is the part where I'll let you reflect inside your head without necessarily typing it in the chat, but based on what's in your learning management system, is that who they would actually think you are, right? Because we know that whether they have a connection with faculty or not is one of the most important factors in whether students continue, right? So whether they continue from one semester to the next, whether they make it all the way to graduation, one of the biggest factors is, do they have some level of deep connection with one or more faculty? And what I want you to start thinking about is, based on what you've got in your learning management system, right? Based on the way that you're typing announcements, based on the language that is in your assignments, based on how your syllabus is written, is that introduction to your students coming off as this person that you want them to think you are? right? Because often before the semester even starts, we give our students access to our LMS so they can go in, they can start reading our syllabus, they can start looking through the assignments, right? If that's their first impression of us, are we actually coming off as warm and helpful and approachable? Right. And this is particularly, important, again, as we think about our underrepresented students, our first generation students that are maybe a little bit more reluctant to reach out to us, are going to be maybe scared off more by that first impression. Are we actually telling them who we are? Right. So the number one thing that you can do to really help out your students is think about your tone and presence in everything that you do. Right. So I put this meme that goes around on the internet a lot, right? Every email I ever send, right? Hello, exclamation point. I am extremely excited to be corresponding with you, exclamation point. You can tell by the number of exclamation points that I use. Here's one sentence with a period so that I don't come across as manic, thanks, exclamation point, right? And the reason that this is such a meme that folks connect with is that if I read an email from someone and it doesn't have at least one exclamation point, right, it comes across as that person is yelling at me, right? They are angry with me. Now, the person that wrote it was probably just kind of in a hurry, using a neutral tone. But when I read it, it comes across as kind of angry and standoffish. So be thinking about that as you're writing, these things to your students. So when you're writing announcements, are they just kind of, back of our mind, I'm just typing this fast, and in my mind, it's just a quick note, but they're interpreting it as, this instructor is angry with me, they're not very warm, they're not very caring. So how do you put a little bit more care into your tone? How do you let students kind of know who you are? So taking these as opportunities to build connections with your students and build instructor presence, right? So yeah, using welcome letters is an awesome thing. So a welcome letter, or a quick video that says, hey, this is who I am, I'm really excited that you're here, can really change that first impression of your students and make you feel a little bit more like an actual human. Right. You can also use surveys to learn about them. So creating a quick survey in your LMS to figure out what are your students afraid of coming into this course? What is their background? Is there anything that they're particularly worried about? Is there anything that you could do to help them better succeed? And then you have information that you can use to kind of personalize any conversations that you're going to have with them in the future. Yeah, so if you've got, D2L, you can actually use that feature to address them to specific students. If you're sending an email, maybe taking a moment to use that mail merge so that it comes across directed to their actual name instead of just, going out into the ether as, hey, students. Those kind of personalization really do go a very long way. Right. So the first kind of principle is use that LMS to display instructor presence, to tell your students who you want them to think you are, and to build connections with students. Right. The second principle is that our course is never actually as intuitive as we think it is. So how we set up the material goes a really long way as to how frustrated our students get very quickly. Right. So this is where kind of the activities that I'm going to give you at the end are going to help you with this piece a lot. But what I highly recommend that you do, if you're not already doing it, is make a course overview video and make it the very first thing that your students see as soon as they click into your course, right? And this video, it can start with a really nice welcome message of, hi, I'm really glad you're here. Thank you for enrolling in this course. I'm here to support you on your learning journey, right? So you can include those pieces as well, but then give them a tour of your course, right? So there are an infinite number of ways that any course can be set up within your learning management system, right? And you set it up in a way that makes logical sense for you. It's highly intuitive for you. But it's not necessarily that intuitive to your students, right? So your students come from a widely different experience with course design. Some of them, this is their first time ever using a learning management system to begin with. So just giving them a quick, hey, here's where assignments are going to be posted. Here's where you're going to find content. Here's how you can actually upload those assignments. Here's where you can find the syllabus. Here is how the gradebook is set up. Here's how grades are weighted. Here's how you can tell what's going on with your grades. Just taking a quick 5 minutes to explain that is going to help your students a lot in understanding your thought process as you are designing your course, and it's going to help them feel a lot more welcome. Right? It's going to help them feel more connected to the course, and right, that's another place where you can have that instructor presence of, I am showing that I care about you and I'm supporting you on your learning journey. Right, and then when it comes to how you set up your course, make sure that it's a very clear repeating structure across all sections of your course. Right, so a lot of times we set it up as here's week 1, here's week 2, here's week 3. Make sure that within that you've got a nice, clear repeating structure with things that are very, very clearly labeled. Right, so maybe within each unit you've got learn, connect, and demonstrate. Right, so in the learn area, it's all of the content that they're supposed to, read or watch. In the connect area, this is where they're going to connect with other students. This is where they've got, discussion boards or collaborative activities. And then in the demonstrate area, this is where you're going to show your learning. So this is where those assignments are going to be, right? And then within every single unit, it's learn, connect, demonstrate, learn, connect, demonstrate. So students know what to expect, and they can very clearly, easily find which pieces they're looking for. So if they want to return to a lecture from week 2, and we're currently in week 4, they know that they go to the learn area, and that's where that information is going to be found. Right? So making sure that there's a clear structure is important. Colleen mentioned in the chat, if you want an eye opener, Zoom with a student and have them kind of navigate through things, absolutely. And one of the activities that I'm going to give you is actually that. So having somebody else go through your course, try to find things, and then tell you exactly what they found, right? So the third principle here is put due dates on everything, right? And this is something that's pretty obvious if it's a fully online course, or maybe if it's a hybrid course. But if this is a face-to-face course, make sure that you're doing that same thing, right? Because students, again, especially our neurodivergent students, use that to-do list for everything, right? So if you have assignments that you're giving in person, and they're due a week later in person, a lot of times we don't think to put that stuff in the LMS. We might add the column later so that we can get the grades in there, but we don't necessarily put it in ahead of time so that it gets added to their to-do list. I highly recommend you do that, because I have had a lot of students in my face-to-face courses that say, I totally missed that deadline, and it's because you didn't put that in the LMS. A lot of those are neurodivergent students that maybe have ADHD and have a lot of trouble keeping track of those due dates. If we just take that little bit of time at the beginning of the semester to drop those due dates in, we can really help keep those students on track, and that's a big element in whether they're able to fully succeed, right? And yeah, also adding in the those little reminders of, this is the point in time at which you should start working on these long-term projects, right? Because a lot of times students get lost in those very long-term things where, the due date is only at the very end of the course. Building in some elements that go on the to-do list of, hey, you should be working on your first draft now. Hey, you should be doing your peer review now. Hey, you should be doing your editing now, is also gonna help them a lot. Right, and tied into that is making sure that you're putting everything into your LMS gradebook. So if you're like me, you got a lot of beef with your gradebook, right? So I come from a Canvas school. There are aspects of the Canvas gradebook that I absolutely hate. It would make my life easier in some ways if I just used a separate spreadsheet that I have access to so that I can get everything set up the way I want it to. But that's not useful for my students. Right, my students need to know at every point in time how they're doing in their course, and that can't happen if I'm keeping track of their grades somewhere else, right? So making sure that every single thing that factors into their grade goes into the grade book at an appropriate point in time, and also making sure that from the beginning of the semester, our grade books are weighted properly. Right, so if we use a weighted grading system, sometimes folks will wait until the very end of the semester to set that up, or sometimes, items will end up in the wrong category over the course of the semester, and that all gets fixed at the very end. That means that your students the entire semester have an inaccurate picture of what that final grade is going to be, and it's going to be a pretty jarring experience when suddenly their grade changes. So the point here is that, all of these things are going to help your students a lot, right? They're big equity factors because they're especially going to help your neurodivergent students, but it's also going to help you, right? Because, if you wait until the end of the semester to weight your grade book, you're going to suddenly get a ton of emails that say, my grade just changed, what happened? Right? And you can head that off by setting it up early. If you've got this very clear repeating structure, you don't have to worry about students saying, I can't find this thing because this week of the course is set up very differently and I don't know where stuff is supposed to be. Right? So these are all things that don't take a whole lot of time as an instructor to set up, and it's going to save you tons of time and energy and emails, right? And those are the emails that make us super frustrated and angry when we go into grading. So it's also going to help your student grades when you're not feeling super anxious and angry going into the grading. Yeah, so, students also like a kind of up-to-date grade kind of feature so they can see how they're doing. Some LMSs like Canvas have it where they can actually put in hypothetical grades for future things so that they can play out the entire semester. But that doesn't work unless you have all of those grade columns in there for them to play with. So the earlier you have everything set up, the more students can make use of those features that exist within your LMS, right? So our third piece here is to use those factors that are built into your LMS to make sure that we're grading equitably, right? So research that I'm sure folks have already heard about, right? When teachers expect students to succeed, they act differently and their students perform better. If you expect your students to not succeed, you treat them differently and they don't get as high of grades. So the amount of attention that you pay to them, the probability that you respond to their, I need an extension with yes versus no. A lot of that depends on how you feel about their probability of success in the course. Now, most LMSs have settings that are built in to kind of help you deal with these implicit biases, right? So we're biased based on, things like race and gender, as well as, do we know this student going in here? So did we have them in a previous course and they didn't do very well? Is this the second time they're taking it with us and they failed it last time? Or, was this a student that last semester got an A, we know they're great and we believe in their potential, right? We don't want to be grading based on our beliefs. We want to be grading based on what it is that students turn in. So rubrics are something that substantially help with a couple of things here, right? One, it helps make your standards a lot more clear to students. So you're saying, these are the 5 things that I'm going to be looking at when I'm grading. Here's how much of the paper it's going to be worth. And that way students can see, is grammar something that's worth 1% of the grade where it's something that maybe I don't have to think about that much? Or is this worth, 20% of the grade and I really need to edit this paper a lot because, I'm going to get docked substantially if I'm making those grammatical errors, right? So letting students know ahead of time what to expect is going to help them better write the paper or complete the work in a way that you want it to. And there's also a lot of research showing that it makes your grading more consistent. So you're not thinking, oh, I know what this student is capable of, and I think they just kind of had a bad day, or I can tell exactly what they were trying to say, so I'm going to bump up their grade, versus this student was really confusing and they were really confusing on their last paper, so I need to drop their grade a little bit more to really help get this point across, right? So those rubrics can help us be a lot more consistent, and that's important from an equity perspective. Lots of LMSs also have built-in anonymous grading features. So when you're doing your grading, you can take off the student name so that you don't even have the names to be able to engage in those implicit biases. So that can help reduce it. If you're going to do that, you do need to tell students not to put their names on the top of their work. Otherwise, the anonymous feature isn't going to work. But it is a really nice way of kind of helping decrease our implicit biases. Right. And then the other big thing that we can do, of course, is using our feedback to support students. So a lot of times when we're grading, we notice all of the things that students didn't do quite right. We're trying to help them. But again, right, when we think about our tone to students, that kind of comes off as, I am getting yelled at, I am in trouble. And that means that they're in kind of a not so great mental space to be able to pay attention to and use our feedback. So there's some really cool research showing that by using this, what's called wise feedback technique, right? By just putting at the top of the paper, the first thing that they see in the comments, I am giving you these comments because I have high expectations and I know you can reach them, right? So we're telling our students, I'm here to support you. I believe in your success. And these comments are designed to help you improve rather than, being seen as something that you did wrong. It substantially improves performance, especially for underrepresented minority students. Right? So this is where we can show our students that we have a lot of faith in their abilities, that we're here to support them, and that they should take these as comments that are designed to help them rather than, something that we're going to hold against them. Also, yeah, as Ben mentioned in the chat, don't grade hungry and take breaks, right? And that's, a real important thing, right? If we are not in a good mental state, we do end up taking that out on our students. If we do a marathon grading session of, 4 hours without taking a break, by the end, those students are not going to be getting the same level of attention. They're not going to be graded in the same way as those early ones. And yeah, when it comes to rubrics, definitely keep them simple, keep them focused. Don't give them a 50-point rubric. Give them the 4 or 5 things that you're actually going to be looking at. And when you're grading, yeah, don't always grade your students in the same order. Mix it up to make sure that those students at the end of the alphabet aren't always the ones that are getting graded when you're hungry and angry and don't want to be grading anymore. So those are kind of my big 3 principles that I want you to be taking away from this. So the last thing that I want to talk about for the remaining time that we have here is, how do you put this stuff into practice, right? Because as instructors, we do not design our course in a way that is intentionally confusing for students and intentionally inequitable, and intentionally, putting forward an instructor presence of, being cold and standoffish, right? So how do we notice these things about our courses, and how do we use these principles to improve the equity aspects of our course, right? And what I want us to think about here is the value of the peer review process in looking at our courses. And when I start talking about this stuff with faculty, there's an immediate kind of fear, anxiety response, right? So why is it that when I say, let's have other people go into our learning management system and look at our courses, why are we immediately, no, that's a terrifying thing. I don't want anyone else to ever look at my Canvas course ever. So why is that our immediate response to being asked to have other people look at our courses? And you can drop some answers in the chat of why we feel anxious about that. Or maybe none of you at all feel anxious about other people digging into your courses. Right? Imposter syndrome, stereotype threat, judgment, absolutely. Right? Fear of scrutiny. Right? And what I want us to think about, right, as we're all bringing forward kind of those scary feelings, is when it comes to our other professional work, right, when it comes to us submitting scholarly work, right, to publication in journals, right, we're a little bit scared, but that doesn't stop us from doing it, right? We would never expect to get something published in a peer-reviewed journal without another human looking at it, right? The peer review process is a normal part of it. Sometimes it's anxiety provoking and it's not fun, but we get a lot out of it. We get a lot of feedback. And so what I'm suggesting here is that maybe we should think about our teaching in the same way that we think about our scholarly work, right? And I see a lot of folks being like, teaching is always a work in progress. It's never 100% done. Has anyone ever felt 100% done with their scholarly work before they send it out? Because I sure haven't. I always feel like this is as good as it's going to get right now, and I really need to get this out in the world. So I guess I'm gonna let it be, right? So what I'm encouraging folks to do here is to think about your teaching in the same way that you think about scholarly work, right? So the anxiety is not going to go away. We're still going to be afraid of letting people look at it, but think about it as something that's going to help you improve, and that it's designed as a formative experience, not as something that's intended as judgment, right? And when you're doing this, think carefully about the person that you're going to have peer review it, right? So this isn't where you're just going to pull in a random colleague and say, hey, you want to look at this, right? Find somebody that you trust, that you think is going to approach this in a non-judgmental way, and engage in this peer review process to really think about these potential challenges, right? And the idea here is that, this other instructor, it can take the place of, that new student that can dig in and start looking at things, to notice some of these potential problems, to think about what tone you're giving off, to think about what kind of navigational challenges there are, to help you notice those things before you send them out to students, right? And the idea here is that, if you just have one of your colleagues dig into your course without any instruction, can they find important things? Can they find the syllabus? Can they find your grading policies? Can they figure out, due dates? Without having to be told what's going on, right? And this really normalizes treating this as any other kind of scholarly activity. And the important thing, as I think it was Felicia mentioned, this is going to give us kind of both sides of it, right? So for both having people peer review it and also peer reviewing stuff for other people, we can learn that everybody's got the same challenges. Everybody has the same fears and anxieties. But sometimes you're going to find that people have solutions to some of the challenges that you have, and you can use this as a way to make things better. So it's scary, it can be overwhelming, but I highly recommend thinking about how you can integrate this into your course. So I have an activity here that I have used with some faculty, and this is a modified version of it. And I will drop the direct link in the chat for those that don't have the slides up right now. This is a scavenger hunt activity, right? So it guides you. What the idea here is that you're going to swap courses with another instructor if you're feeling comfortable with this peer review idea. Bonus points if this is somebody that's kind of in a different discipline. So maybe a friend of yours in a kind of different discipline that may have a very different organizational structure. So you can learn some variety that's out there. Or, if you're more, you're not comfortable with bringing in a peer yet, maybe find somebody that's not familiar with your LMS. So maybe find, a high school student that that's gonna be going to college in a couple of years, and you want to say, hey, if you were a college student, what would you make of this course, right? So that may be a little bit scary and less intimidating. Don't tell them anything ahead of time, right? So the idea here is this is the student's first introduction to the course. This is how they're going to be learning and making first impressions, and then have them try to find some things in the scavenger hunt. So there's a ton of stuff on that scavenger hunt document. You may want to modify, delete, add things based on your particular course, your particular learning management system. So I kept this very vague so that it would be, applicable to a wide variety of LMSs. So definitely, tailor it to your specific situation. But the idea here is to figure out what is a person thinking and feeling and doing when they first enter our courses. And does this fit with our understanding of what we're expecting from our students, right? So this is just a good way of getting a little bit of that kind of peer feedback or maybe, non-peer other student feedback of what's going on. It looks like somebody dropped a chat to a kind of similar thing. So I'll have to take a look at that as well. So there are a few different ways of going about this. And then the last one thing that I'll leave you with is a kind of personal course reflection. So the peer review one is more geared toward what do other people experience in our course? And then this one is more geared at that kind of personal reflection. So taking a deep dive into the different aspects of your course, spending some time thinking about, the different pieces of what's going on. And this is kind of designed to be a little bit less formal and intimidating than some of the rubrics that have been shared earlier this week. So there've been a ton of activities along this way, or along these lines. This one's just designed to be kind of more reflective and less formal. But the idea is to kind of work through this and think about what's going on in your course. And for both of these activities, for the slides, feel free to share them with anyone. I'm not overly concerned about them getting out into the world, so share them with anyone that you think would benefit. The only caveat here is that if you make them better, send them back, right? So I'll give you my email address. If you take these and improve upon them, send them back to me so that I can use the improved versions as well. So that's my kind of philosophy of sharing information. So I will leave you with that. Again, I'm with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I've given you my email there as well as my office phone number. And you can find more information about what my team is up to and some of the workshops that we've done at our website. And with that, thanks for coming. It looks like we've got about 4 minutes left if anyone does have questions.
That is true. We do have 4 minutes, and I'm just scrolling back up through the chat to see if we missed any, because there are so many great responses to your prompts that there are a lot to go through. But we also have a smallish group of 71, so people can also raise their hand if they wish to ask a question or provide feedback to Amy with your voice. And I will also put in the chat the link to the Padlet so that we can continue the conversation asynchronously, because we all know that some of our colleagues could not be here. They had work, they had something called sleep in the areas known as New Zealand and Australia, and anything else that might get in the way of being here and now. So
yeah,
looks like Sophia has a question. Do you have a template of your syllabus in the Commons, whether that be Creative Commons or?
Yeah, I actually do not. I didn't think about putting anything in the Commons because this was kind of geared toward anyone with any kind of LMS. And I'm not actually teaching right now. So as an instructional designer, I haven't been teaching for about the last 2 years. So these are more things that I tell other people to do and haven't had the opportunity to put into practice a whole lot. Although I get to teach in the fall, so that's very exciting for me.
Wonderful.
Amy, thank you. I think it's wonderful that you encourage us all to get extra set of eyes on our courses. We really shouldn't be shy about it. I think that we fear that we're so critical, about everything, really, but that's the nature of being a teacher, right? But that we do, I find in online learning and teaching that we have a lot of really warm and sympathetic folks who are willing to support. And so that has always helped me invite people over to take a look at my course.
Yeah, and I like to think of it as, if I look at somebody else's course, I'm not going to be mean about it. I'm not going to be hypercritical, right? I'm here to give formative feedback to help people get better. So, I would assume that the other person that I'm doing this with is going in with those good intentions as well. And that's why, I do recommend finding someone that you already trust, that you believe is gonna give you the kind of positive feedback that you're looking for.
This is Nadia from California. I just wanted to say that I liked I found it very helpful, the approach that you shared about how to kind of support people maybe who don't feel quite ready to say that they're on board with the equity train, but that we can still have the same outcomes for our students. And so that was just, for many things, that was a really helpful example. So thank you.
Yeah, I find that often kind of talking about it in terms of student outcomes is a good way of entering into that conversation. And now it's, oh, look, you're already doing something that helps equity. Here are some other things, because I don't think there are ever faculty that don't care about equity, period. It's more, I don't see this as essential to my course. I don't see anything that I can particularly do. So this is just kind of a good way of starting that conversation with something that does apply to their course and can help their students, and it can get them to see, our intentions of equity in maybe a slightly different way.
Hi, Amy, it's Maria Fernandez from CSUN. I also wanted to thank you. I liked the piece about the grading, just highlighting that about the equity. I know sometimes, faculty convincing about some of the grading being upfront when you're designing even the rubrics, and just the approach of the equity piece. It was very helpful, that language and that discussion to have. So thank you.
Yeah, and that's another one where, as soon as you use the R word, right, rubric, a lot of people go, I don't use rubrics. I don't want to tell my students what to do, because then they're just going to do what I told them to do. But then you get angry at them for not doing what you told them to do. So, framing it as being clear about expectations rather than, locking them into a very rigid kind of way of grading things, because a lot of people see rubrics as rigid and doesn't work for my kind of class. And so approaching it as you're just telling students what to do and how you're going to grade them, and you're making those standards very visible, it is a good way of getting folks a little bit more on board with those.
Thank you. It was very good, very good.
Oh, Amy, yeah, I like that idea of getting them to contribute to the rubric design next time. So making it an iterative process where you're getting some student feedback and incorporating that. I love that. Oh, yeah. Using the peer review to build a rubric that you can use for peer review. Fantastic. Love that idea.
And, Amy, I'll also say, as I mentioned in the talk I gave before this, I have students do their peer reviews as a video conference, so they film it and I listen, and I've learned a whole lot about what was understandable about my rubrics or my directions based on their feedback. But again, I wouldn't recommend it if you're not up for criticism. So you got to be at a place like, right, make sure you ate and it was a good day before you listen to them talk about the assignment.
But yeah, getting the student input of what do students actually think about as they're reading through, our grading criteria or our rubrics, can be a really enlightening experience. And yeah, you can learn a lot from just hearing how your students are understanding, things that you're intending in a very different way. Yeah, I like adding the TLDR version of assignments at the top so that they can get the takeaway points before doing the deep dive. Yeah.
And now, based on your strategies, I'd like to make like an executive summary overview video, not with all the details of how to complete the assignment, but to give like almost like a preview or a trailer.
Yeah.
Coming soon, an assignment near you, and this is what you need to do, and then let them read the instructions.
Sorry, TLDR stands for too long didn't read. So you see that a lot on social media posts where at the top you'll put the very shortened one sentence version of something that's otherwise very, very long to read. But yeah, I like the idea of kind of the trailer version of our assignments. Yeah, so some of my faculty actually after they do assignments, we'll get feedback from students that they'll then use as an FAQ page that goes along with it for the next iteration, so that students are getting the information that other students wish they had had before they completed it. So yeah, those are great ideas of incorporating student feedback into future versions of what we're doing. Previously in our class, love that. All right, other thoughts, questions, comments, ideas to share? This has been a fantastic session. Y'all are great.
And so in case there aren't, I'm going to put it one more time in the chat, the Padlet board link, so people can post their questions, their comments, their ideas of what they're doing at their own campus. Hopefully at some point, Amy will put a link to some kind of syllabus template that people have been asking for. This is the, we have a break now until 12 noon Pacific. And I think that's just time for people to wake up out in New Zealand, Australia. And it's just late enough that the folks will be stopping off before dinner in Europe. So we hope you'll join us again in a couple of hours. Amy, thank you so much for a fantastic session. We had 2 Amy's in a row and they both did a fantastic job. And I hope the snow melts quickly and that you have warm weather in Nebraska soon.
Absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, y'all are great.